I'm just thinking about substances and how they feature within thinking and in the imagination. What I mean by that is, I said this before and I might be wrong, but I'm going to stick with it for now. I think that cognition, the stuff that happens in your brain, the thinking thing, only uses the material of sensory engagement. I think that's what its vocabulary is. I think the vocabulary of thinking on a subconscious level is this stuff, the stuff of feeling and the stuff of seeing and the stuff of taste, all that kind of. It's sensory experience, I think. The stuff that's captured in things like image schema. But I think it's also captured in what we think of as substances. Because and I'm not talking scientifically here, I'm talking in a kind of vernacular, experiential, phenomenological way. We only engage with certain kinds of substances, or the categories of substances break themselves up in our lived experience in ways that science doesn't really do. We have solids and we have liquids and we have gases, and that's pretty much it. Well, I guess we have empty space, that's the other thing now, isn't it? Because we can't conceive of nothing. So I think when we conceive of nothing, we're actually conceiving of empty space. So those are that's the substance that forms part of that vocabulary I mentioned. Solids, liquids and gases, I think. Not plasmas or these exotic things you find in the Large Hadron Collider. But even amongst those substances, I think they're conceived differently. I think when we think of reality, and I'm not talking about thinking rationally and scientifically, I'm just talking in that kind of intuitive, when our intuition's playing out. I think that when we think of reality, we associate it with solids. Because we talk about, I don't know if we do talk about this, but we seem to talk about solid reality and about, hard facts and that kind of texture and that kind of resilience. And I think there's something going on in our minds there that associates reality and realness and authenticity with hardness and solidity. So when we want to stress how real something is, we use the language of hardness and the language of solidity. And it's not the same with the other substances. Of course we know intellectually that liquids and gases and empty space is as real as solids, but there's something about them, I think, that just renders them on an intuitive level a bit different. I think vapours and things like that are slightly less real, somehow. And I've just been just thinking about that really. I'm just wondering how that plays itself out actually in our thoughts. And I suppose I'm reminded here of, God, I can't pronounce this name, but he was a philosopher, quasi-scientist from a couple of thousand years ago, spelt Thales, so it's either pronounced Thales or Thales or Thales or something like that, Thales, let's say. And this guy Thales said that everything was water. That's what his take on it was. He said everything is water. It's an interesting thing to say, I think, because obviously this is pre-science, pre-physics, pre the idea that the world is made up of a limited number of constituents like atoms or elements or atomic particles. But before all that, so to say that the whole world was made of a single thing, put together in interesting ways, it was a pretty radical thing to say. And as I say, he chose water. And I think that's really fascinating, that. What must it do to if you can somehow internalise that thought, what must it do to your view of the world if instead of having what I suspect is this understanding of reality, which is everything's made of bits, everything's made of solid stuff, and I think that's even how we kind of visualise physics, even though we know there's energy and forces and fields and things there, we kind of imagine that little bits of hard stuff, don't we? On some level I think we're still doing the bits of hard stuff thing. But what would it be like if we adopted Thales' philosophy? Said, it looks like it looks hard to touch, all that kind of stuff at this level, but really it's made of water. It's made of something liquid. It's not made of, because it's as true to say that everything's made of liquid as it is to say everything's made of solid, really, on an atomic, subatomic, quarky level. So it's not completely mad. I think it's just no more mad than our own thinking is. You know, what is it like then if everything's made of water? If this TV, look at this TV aerial here, by the way, I'll just point to it. I'm in my campsite where my caravan is, and for some reason this empty plot has a TV aerial pointed at a peculiar angle. Anyway, what would it be like to imagine that TV aerial made out of water on a fundamental level? You know, the solid shape that we're seeing there, I think at least, starts to take on a different kind of quality. You know, if you kind of imagine the water in it, imagine its wateriness, you know, that this shape is just like a vortex, a persistent vortex in that water, or is a particularly frozen moment in the various phase transitions that water goes through. You know, and the same is true of everything really. It all feels a little bit more transient when you imagine it as water rather than as solid little bits flying around like like as I say, we tend to conceptualise it. And there are my neighbours, look, the sheep that I share this field with, well kind of. You might not see it in here, there's actually an electrified fence just between me and the sheep. Keep them at bay, fuck off sheep. That's kind of how it goes really. Yes. So yeah, and I can't imagine what it would be like if everything was gas. You know what I mean? If you took Thales one stage further and imagine the world not as made of tiny bits of atoms, not the one that we have, tiny bits of stuff like this gravel, you know, atoms like this. That's, you know, so instead of imagining atoms and subatomic particles as those things in wild flight around one another, and instead of imagining it like Thales did, this water somehow crystallizing and vortexing everything into existence. You know, what would it be like if everything was, if you could imagine everything as gas? You know, the third in the holy trinity of substances of the imagination. I don't know what all this stuff would be then. Precipitates, clouds, rain, I don't know what it would be. And if everything was just empty space, which is probably more realistic if you're talking in these terms, everything is probably closer to empty space than it is to solids, liquids or gases. If everything was made of empty space, twisted and knotted up and turned in on itself and inverted and have that done to it. Look at the colour of my fingers, look at that. I've been working on my motorbike that I bought and I am filthy dirty. Anyhow, yeah, everything is water.